To me, the peaks and valleys are how I like to eat and how I like to cook, which is that, one bite is one way, the next bite's another way, and one bite is sweet, one bite is sour, one bite is like an explosion, the next bite is more mellow, one bite is crunchy, one bite is soft. So, for me, balance is about more than just, sweet and sour. It's about sweet, sour, spicy, salty, crunchy, soft, rich. So trying to balance those out and then again create these sort of peaks and valleys where one bite is more exciting than the next, but doesn't mean the next one is boring. It just means that it's kind of setting you up for the next one. So you kind of go up and down in these peaks and valleys, and that's kind of what I look for in my dining experiences as well as my cooking.
Behind every amazing flavor is an amazing human who has perfected their craft. Welcome to Flavors Unknown, a behind-the-scenes look at new flavors and the chefs, pastry chefs, and bartenders who create them, with your host, Emmanuel.
Welcome to episode 72 of the Flavors Unknown podcast. My guest today is Chef Dan Kluger from Loring Place in Manhattan. I am your host, Emmanuel LaRoche, and if you are new to this podcast, I've been working in the food industry for more than 20 years, both in Europe and in the US, and every other week I share inspirational stories of US renowned culinary leaders and how their cultural identity shaped their creative process. Dan Kluger worked with renowned chefs such as Danny Myers, Floyd Cardoz, Tom Colocchio, and Jean-Georges, and he became the leading force behind some of New York top kitchen, including Jean-Georges' ABC Kitchen, where he won the James Beard Award for Best New Restaurant. Today, Chef Dan Kluger is going to talk about his different food concepts at the restaurant Loring Place that it opened in 2016, as well as the delivery concept of New York grandma-style pizza called Washington Squares that he launched during the pandemic in 2020, and his second restaurant opened in January 2021 called Penny Ridge in Long Island City. If you love cookbooks, you should definitely buy his new cookbook called Chasing Flavor, where he captured the essence of his New York City restaurant Loring Place and showing how the tastes are layered in each of his simple recipe. So welcome, Chef. I'm really excited to have you on the podcast Flavors Unknown.
Thank you for having me. Really happy to be here as well.
Just wanted to have a little bit of a feeling of how you're doing, with this crazy situation and even for you the challenge of opening like a restaurant during the pandemic. Can you share with us your state of mind?
Yeah, I think my state of mind is it could certainly be a lot worse. And one of the lessons that I took away from my time with Floyd, who I'm sure we'll talk about later, was he always taught me to find the gold in every scenario, and or some people refer to it as the silver lining. And I think that's a big part of right now is trying to find the gold every day, trying to look for that silver lining. And, obviously there's some silver linings that, the first 3 or 4 months, worked from home for the most part. I felt incredibly busy, but I worked from home. And so got to see my family more than I normally would have, maybe to their chagrin, but it was good. And then, I think work-wise, this has been an interesting year of trying to constantly find better ways to do things, smarter ways to do things, and just find new things to do. And so, we knew we'd be opening Penny Bridge, which is the second restaurant that we opened in Long Island City. But, out of Loring Place, we looked at it and said we have to find new sources of revenue. And much like many people, we did family meals, we did meal kits, we've done tons of things. And so we're constantly evaluating that, constantly thinking of new things to do, and most recently decided to launch a pizza place that's for delivery and takeout only through Loring Place. And so for as hard as the year's been and as crappy as it's been, and for all the hits that we keep on taking, especially financially, it's been somewhat rewarding. I think the team is feeling beat up and exhausted and working harder than ever because we're working leaner and, everybody's taking on a lot. But I think, for the most part, I think we're feeling somewhat inspired or somewhat positive by, the fact that we're still here, still ticking. Obviously, many restaurants have not survived this.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a testament to the hard work that everybody's put in and to this constant creativity. And I think, some of it is here to stay and some is not.
Your takeout concept is the Washington Squares, correct? And that which is comfort food, like pizza type of food.
Yep. So I said this recently, I've worked for a very long time at trying to make vegetables the center of the plate and make vegetables really the celebrated thing that we do. And for as hard as we've worked at that and creating these amazing vegetables, the pizzas and the burger have gained the most notoriety. And early on, we had started this thing called the Grandma Pizza, which is just a pan pizza basically. And people seem to love it. And so when I was sitting there thinking about other things we could do, this idea came to me to come up with a pizza concept that essentially is just grandma pan pizzas. It's done out of our production kitchen downstairs, which is really it's a kitchen for production, large volume, which we're not doing as much of, and for our events, which we're not doing any of. So we had the space. We thought we would use it. Doesn't have a pizza oven, just regular ovens. So basically, these pan pizzas work really well in there. I've been kind of thinking about doing something, and I was at home and I found these incredible OXO pans that I have. They're like OXO sheet pans, but they're like a non-stick coating and little ridges in them. And I put a bunch of pizza dough in there and I made a bunch of things, and I was just kind of floored at how well they came out. And so that was the start of it. And it's basically 6 or so pizzas. All of them are available gluten free as well. And then we have 3 salads, some meatballs, which are far from the normal meatball, and then cookies and a sundae. And that's essentially it. So really simple, small menu, somewhat inspired by Jim Leahy's Co-Pizza, which is one of my favorite pizza places. Is unfortunately closed, but I've always loved Jim's pizzas, but I also love this concept of sort of the modern day pizzeria.
Yeah,
That's
and it's
really
resonated a lot with the need for comfort food. During the time of COVID from
Yeah.
consumers. So I get that. The other one, I mean, opening the other place in Long Island City, Penny Ridge, is really like a real challenge during that the situation of the pandemic. So why did you decide to to do it now?
The project had fallen very far behind. We started construction literally probably the day they closed construction in the city, and then we restarted as soon as they opened us back up. So the construction team did a great job of getting it done, given the restrictions, and it sort of just felt like, I had the chef on board and the sous chef on board, and I had some people at Loring Place that we were looking to move, and kind of just felt like, all right, we're done. The place is sitting empty. I should do something with it. So we opened for takeout and delivery only 5 days a week. And truthfully, I think everything about it's great. The restaurant came out great. The food is great. It will be amazing at some point, but and the neighborhood will be amazing at some point. But right now, it's still quiet. It's freezing out. People are eating outside, but it didn't really make sense. And so even the takeout wasn't doing that well. So we actually ended up pressing pause on that, and we'll reopen everything indoors, outdoors, takeout, delivery in the spring.
Okay, got it. I mean, it's coming. So
It's coming, yeah. Especially with the way the weather is today.
Last year, you published your first cookbook. In fact, I took it with me here on my trip, so and which is wonderful, and called Chasing Flavor. And I was just curious, what's the reason or the story behind the title?
I mean, I think it depends on what version you want, right? The story behind it took a long time to get there.
Like the genuine story, not the one for the marketing, people.
No, I mean, I think, it's all the same in the sense that I think my food has always been thought of as being very flavorful, flavor forward, and kind of exciting. And so felt like flavor was a big part of the name in some way, but kind of struggling on a way to present it. And the book was supposed to be a lot about teaching lessons and teaching to cook. And one of my all-time favorite books is Tom Colicchio's Think Like a Chef. And the way in which it's kind of it creates a lesson on how to roast a tomato, how to roast a vegetable, how to roast a piece of fish. And then the next one is on how to braise a piece of fish, how to braise a vegetable. And then towards the end, he's saying, okay, this is how you put these things together.
Yeah.
And so I always thought like I wanted my book to take somewhat of approach of that, to be more educational than just a list of recipes. And as we were kind of thinking about this, we did a sort of brainstorming session about names, and flavor kept coming up and a whole bunch of other words kept coming up, but somehow or another we came up with chasing flavor. And it at first felt like it's like too kitschy. And then I realized, the whole point is I want people to cook flavorfully. I want them to want to take something as simple as broccoli and make it the most flavorful thing on the table. And so the reality is, I'm always chasing some kind of flavor. I'm always
Yeah,
chasing that
exactly.
mindset, and I want everybody else to do the same.
I just wanted to say that it seems to be that it was like, your quest, like over your entire career, is like to chase that flavors, to create and find this, balance as well between, between flavors. And it's really interesting to hear you talking about having this like tasting experience for the consumers, like to have that progression when they are tasting, they put like, have a bite of the food that you are creating, and having those effects of like the peak and the valley. I mean, that's something that you are using in an expression that I heard you said several times. So
Yeah.
can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, to me the peaks and valleys are how I like to eat and how I like to cook, which is that, one bite is one way, the next bite's another way, and one bite is sweet, one bite is sour, one bite is like an explosion, the next bite is more mellow, one bite is crunchy, one bite is soft. So, for me balance is about more than just, sweet and sour. It's about sweet, sour, spicy, salty, crunchy, soft, rich. So trying to balance those out, and then again create these sort of peaks and valleys where one bite is more exciting than the next, but doesn't mean the next one is boring. It just means that it's kind of setting you up for the next one. So you kind of go up and down in these peaks and valleys, and that's kind of what I look for in my dining experiences as well as my cooking.
How do you convey that to like the home cook, in your book? And what will be the advice that you would give, anyone cooking professionally or as a hobby, to achieve that balance and those peaks and valleys that you are talking about?
Everything is going to have incredible peaks and valleys. A bowl of mashed potatoes is going to be a bowl of mashed potatoes. It's about how do you make them the best you possibly can be, and how do you balance some of these things out. And that may you don't necessarily need sweet and sour with the potatoes, but you need to think about, how do I elevate them a little bit in terms of the book and how we get this message across. A lot of it is in the recipes themselves, right? So if you take something like the broccoli that I just mentioned, we talk about how you can build flavor through charring or roasting and what that does. So it takes something as mundane as, boiled broccoli, and all of a sudden turns into this thing that's smoky and slightly bitter and crunchy and has these little char notes to it. So you're starting to build flavor there. And then by adding, this mayo, or adding the pistachio vinaigrette, which has lots of herbs and has lemon and has some heat in it and has pistachios in it. You're building this flavor, you're building this balance just automatically. And then the idea is that through the book, there's areas where we pull things out, and they're called the takeaway. And that could be about charring a vegetable or roasting something, or it could be about making this vinaigrette or this dressing that's kind of a setup for multiple things down the road. I like this idea of component cooking, meaning that you're learning about how to make some really specific components that, it's a mayonnaise, it's a dressing, it's a hot sauce, it's a fermented chili, it's dressings, vinaigrettes, and how we build these. And then just because you can't get broccoli today doesn't mean you can't use this pistachio vinaigrette. The pistachio vinaigrette is amazing. It could work with a piece of fish. It could work as part of a chicken. It could work as just salad dressing for a beautiful butterhead lettuce. So again, these components become these core elements that you can use in other ways. And the idea is that through the book, you start to feel more confident as a cook, because you start to master some of these components and realize that, again, this dressing could be used in 10 different ways. The granola that we feature in the acorn, the roasted acorn, the granola is amazing on everything from the acorn to butternut to some roasted potatoes to, I've had friends who put it on apple pie and have put it on yogurt in the morning.
Yeah,
all sorts of different things. So
absolutely.
that's, to me, that's component cooking. That's That's what you get from this book.
And that's really what I like in, in book. I have a lot of cookbooks at home that, I'm sure you do as well. And, what I found like really unique was that section that you call like building blocks of flavor, because for me, it was this idea of, I mean, you're talking about component cooking, which are like several benefits of it. It's the first one, of course, it helps you to expedite, the cooking process when you are, hosting, people at home, or I'm sure like, when you are doing like professional cooking in your restaurant, as well. Second of all, it's really this idea of focusing on an element of a dish and almost like making sure that maybe as a home cook, you are going to think about that element as a secondary task, or, it's not the main component of your dish. Like people think
Right.
about the protein, people think about like the veg, but then there's some other, elements that are much more important when it comes to bringing flavor. So I think when you look at those building block of flavor section, you have those things and you treat them individually and you give the attention, to them separately. And then the other piece is the versatility of it, as you just, explained, that you can take something and you can apply it to a lot of different recipes, and you have them like ready in your pantry and in your fridge, and you can, apply it depending of like the recipe that you are making.
Yeah, that's another word we talk a lot about is pantry, right? We're trying to build this pantry. Again, I use the example of the granola. I have a friend who, as soon as I gave him the book, he started texting me all the things he's making, and he's like, he sent me the acorn squash. He's like, God, it's so amazing. But making this granola is like a full day's project between shopping
Yeah.
and prepping. But the thing that he took away from it was, again, that yeah, it was a little bit of work to do it. Certainly not a day. You got to get used to these things. But once he'd made it, he realized, wow, I can use this in 10 different things. And so, because that element in itself is a building block, it has crunch, it has sweet, it has spice, right? He realized that by sprinkling it over a salad, he's elevated that sort of plain salad just through this one component. So again, things that we try and get across through the book.
Yeah, and what I like as well in the first part of your book before the recipes, talking about the pantry or your tools, I thought it was really cool that you share brands and names of products that usually you don't see that too often in a cookbook. So that really helps, especially I guess like the foodies or like the in the kitchen to understand exactly and then maybe to select the right product.
Yeah, and I get asked a lot about things like, what oil do I use or whatever it is. And so, why not call it out? And we're not, in general, I don't use a lot of things that are hard to get and hard to find. And we certainly find in the restaurant these ingredients that are, really specific to restaurants. But in general, especially for home cooking and for this book, everything was things that, you could find at a great local supermarket, whether it's something like a Whole Foods or a mom and pop. I mean, we don't go crazy with what we're requiring.
So in the book, there's a section about techniques, and I'm curious. We always that in almost like a never-ending debate. When we are talking with chefs, is about like techniques versus creativity. So what is from your point of view the most important for you?
I don't know. Maybe creativity, but I sort of feel like you can have one without the other for sure. But I sort of feel like you need to have them both, right? You could be incredibly creative, but if you have no technique, you're you're never going to be able to follow through with it. So you could come up with this amazing idea, but if you don't know how to facilitate it, what's the point? So I think, creativity is incredibly important, but technique and understanding of very basic techniques is really important to any cooking, whether it's at a home level or restaurant level. And I find it really interesting today. And I remember, spending time at Craft with Tom Colicchio and seeing how the stations in his restaurant were set up. That you had the station that was, mushrooms and potatoes, I think, and all they did was cook mushrooms and potatoes. Another one that was like carrots and grains, or I don't really remember, but you learned how to roast a mushroom, you learned how to roast a carrot. And now so often, a cook comes in and you tell them to roast carrots and you tell them your way to roast carrots, and the mind says, "Hey, I got this. I went to culinary school. I know what I'm doing." And they come back with, this burnt tray of carrots or undercooked tray of carrots. And many times people don't appreciate the simplicity of technique and the simplicity or the output of technique, right? So simple technique can have an incredible impact on that dish by just roasting a carrot properly versus not roasting it properly, roasting a mushroom properly, not roasting properly. And so again, I don't go too in depth with, forcing this technique, but we try and teach some of these methods and teach ways in which you can achieve these things through roasting, grilling, charring, braising, and what you're looking for.
So now that the book is published, and I'm sure sales are going well, because there's a lot of people that are cooking at home. So I think that your book is great for them. What was like the part of the process of the writing the cookbook that you enjoy the most?
I think I worked with an incredible writer who really was able to talk to me about what I wanted the book to be and the lessons that I wanted to get across, but I would have never been able to write this. And he was always able to sit and pull these things out of me and ask the whys that, to me just kind of was common sense. Or it's like when my wife is in the kitchen and she asks me something and I'm like, yeah, just boil it. And I don't realize how few people understand what some of these things mean. And so he was able to extract a lot of that from me, and it taught me even a lot about my own cooking and made me question some of my own cooking. So I think that was probably the most interesting part of the whole process.
Okay. And so do you have a word of wisdom for anyone, who is listening, chefs that are always listening that maybe are caressing the idea of publishing a book? What will be your advice to them?
It's a lot of work.
Don't do it.
No, I think it's an incredibly important thing to do and a wonderful thing to do, but it is a lot of work, and you have to be able to set aside the time. And I think unless you are a writer, you probably need to find somebody to write it with. And so finding that right person, it's just like a relationship. Like there's give and take, and they're going to question things. And so finding the right person, I think, is incredibly important as well. And I think it's a fun process, but it is undoubtedly a lot of work.
How many years did it take you to work on it?
I mean, I think officially probably 2 years, but have been working on it and thinking about it for quite a long time.
Yeah. Okay. So let's switch a little bit, the focus here. And you've been talking about some individuals, from the beginning, Chef, Floyd Cardos, and of course you talk about as well Tom Colicchio. So you had, and I'm sure you have more than this, but there's at least like 4 names that, that comes to mind when you look back at your career. So obviously the kind of a lucky first, I would say, encounter with Denny Meyer, and then obviously Chef Floyd Cardos, then Tom Colicchio and Jean-Georges Franck-Richten. What can you tell us about the experience working with those individuals and what you have learned, from each of them?
I mean, each one had different impacts on my career, and I obviously learned different things at different times. I think Danny Meyer, I got fortunate enough to meet and ended up doing my summer internship at Union Square Cafe, and then went back and spent some more time there after I graduated. And he had a managing partner, Paul Bowles-Bevan, who I think between the two of them, and especially really because of Paul, I learned so much about hospitality, and I learned about front of the house. And I started in the front of the house. I wasn't in the kitchen. And so I learned a lot about what to me was hospitality and what was important in terms of that experience. And then I transferred into the kitchen, and I think I learned a fair amount about cooking and cooking under pressure at Union Square Cafe through Michael Romano and his team. But it wasn't until I went to work with Floyd Cardos at Tabla where I think I really started to learn about flavor. I really started to learn about balance. Obviously about Indian food. It was Indian inspired. And then I became, I got the opportunity to become sous chef and onwards up to chef cuisine. And so I think it was through that experience that I really started to think that this was something for me. And in terms of what I learned from Floyd, I think the lessons are countless, and I think he had more of an impact on my career than probably anybody. But, everything from, again, food stuff to just how to be a good person and how to be a good manager and what was essentially the right thing to do, and slowly learning how to balance doing the right thing with just getting the job done and those sorts of things. And then I went off and I worked with Tom Colicchio on a project where we opened a private club in Midtown. And I think through him, I was able to learn a lot more about American food and American ingredients. At that time, he was using things, much like everybody else, but he was really focused in on where things were coming from. And I mean, Floyd certainly was as well. But, I think being with Tom, it kind of just opened my eyes to a different category of food.
What do you mean by that? What a different category
You
of
know,
food?
because, at Tableau, we were very fortunate enough to get great products and certainly farmer driven food. And we had an incredible relationship with the farmers. But I think when I went to work with Tom, there was certain experiences, whether it was something like finding Benton's bacon or some other things like that, or working with rabbit that I hadn't worked with in a long time, or really just the focus on, again, as I said, roasting a carrot and making that carrot taste as good as it possibly could. Whereas with Floyd, there was a lot of technique on roasting a carrot properly, but it was also dusted with 5 spices. And so it just had a different impact, right, on my career. But I think, especially with Tom, I learned a lot about I learned it indirectly with him giving me the opportunity to be a chef and putting that weight on my shoulders of building a team and opening a restaurant. So I think indirectly I learned a lot from him in terms of that. And then working with Jean-Georges, I started with him doing the Mark Hotel project. And while we were waiting for that to open, I got the experience to travel around and open restaurants as part of his team: Utah, Arizona, DC. I don't know. I think I did about 5 or 6 openings with him. And so that gave me an incredible amount of experience with openings and that stress that comes with that. And then when ABC happened, he helped me hone in on, again, simplicity of ingredients. We were using the same ingredients I had been. One of the reasons why that project I think was so right for me was because I had a really good knowledge of the farmers market and all the local farmers, and we were committed to nothing, with the exception of like olive oil, lemon, limes, and ginger. We were committed to pretty much nothing from further than 150 miles, and so my connections with these farmers made it somewhat easy for me. But I learned a lot about kind of honing, fine tuning that flavor, and looking at ingredients in a different light. But I think most of all from him, I learned a lot about business and being a restaurateur. And I watched him, open my time with him. I think he probably opened 10, 12 restaurants. So being just a fly on the wall for that process, I think really was helpful. And I had been, obviously itching to do my own, or not obviously, I'd been itching for a long time to do my own thing. And again, watching him open these restaurants and see him, pick out the china and pick out the glassware and pick out the linens and things like that was what I wanted to be involved in and what I really longed for in creating something. And so again, being a fly on the wall and seeing him do that, I think just kind of pushed me into that
To open
position.
your place in 14. Okay.
Yeah.
Going back to your relationship professionally with the purveyors and the farmers, I get there's always that critical element of relationship to get like new things and the excitement about like high quality product. How do you manage those relationships when it comes to costs? Because that's a very important element, of managing a restaurant. And I'm guessing that there is this weekly interaction with the purveyors and the farmers when it comes to new product. But you probably have to have, I don't know if it's monthly or quarterly, maybe more, I would say, business meeting with those individuals as well.
Yeah. I mean, I would say we have less of a meeting with the purveyors as much as meeting within, our own team and talking about costs. And what will then happen is a purveyor will come and say, "Oh, I have this amazing whatever, duck. Sounds wonderful. Would love to check it out. How much is it?" And that first question is really kind of one of the most important ones today. I think again the sort of silver lining of this pandemic I think if people have paid attention is that there's been a lot of discussion over just how poor a business running restaurants actually is and how low the profit margins are. And so I think, it's starting to drive this discussion a little more, and it just means we have to be that much smarter with what we take on. And so we may still look at that expensive duck, but we only may take 6 of them a week and run it as a special rather than putting it on the menu for $45 a portion and you're not going to buy it. And then it just sits there. Whereas if we run a special and we have 6 of them and when we're out, we're out. I think in terms of cost, we're more price sensitive today than ever. I think a lot of restaurants they've probably toned down their service a little bit. They maybe are not running with, tablecloths like they used to. Who knows? Maybe.
Or lengthy menu with a lot of items,
Exactly.
too. So, yeah.
Maybe they've trimmed it down a little bit because
Yeah.
cost is so much more apparent.
Okay. So let's talk about creativity, and just curious about what are your sources of inspiration, and how do you approach like the creative aspect in your job?
The inspiration varies a lot. It could be driven by a need, meaning it's spring out. We know we need to change the menu. It could be driven by boredom, tired of looking at a dish, or it could literally be, sort of this like being struck by lightning. And I have a dish that I'm starting to work on this week. I have no idea what made me think of it. I have no idea if it will work or, where we'll get to with it. But I just was literally woke up one morning and was like, I want to do something new with carrots today. And that was the process. But I think the inspiration also comes a lot from the farmer's market. Again, going back to seasonality, walking through the farmer's market and picking up something or tasting a strawberry, whatever it is. And then I think oddly, it can come from, without sounding too like cliche, but it can come from art and colors and pictures, meaning I might see a picture on the cover of Bon Appetit of a roasted chicken, and that doesn't mean I'm gonna make a roasted chicken, but that roasted chicken had carrots and onions and turnips in it, right? And it had a ton of herb drizzled on top. And I looked at this picture and I saw like the dark and the rich and the green. And then I just start thinking about dishes, and something in the back of my mind keeps thinking like, oh, carrots and herbs, carrots and herbs. Let's do some carrots and herbs. Again, nothing to do with chicken, not copying the dish in any way,
Sure.
but something there just made me start thinking about food in a specific way.
And do you have any ingredients lately that you are particularly like excited about these days or like obsessed? I know it usually goes by waves, so I'm just curious if this is a case for you.
No, nothing that I'm really obsessed about. I've always wanted to use a bunch of spices from Burlap and Barrel, and they did a whole spice mix with Floyd Cardozo's wife, when Floyd passed away a year ago, this coming Thursday, actually. And she carried on the legacy and started some spice pastes or spice mixes. And I recently got some and have been kind of using them here and there. And I'm thinking, without going too far into my roots of the Indian food, using some of them because I miss that flavor. And certainly it forces me to think of him at a time that I need to.
Of course. And if there's any specific, I would say, usual like combinations that you have, explored when it comes to maybe using things that are maybe pretend to the world of savory and apply it into sweet, or like in the reverse?
Not really. I think at one point I certainly tried to explore more of that. And I think as I get older, I tend to find myself just yearning for the simple. I'm less inclined to have butternut ice cream as I would have been 5-10 years ago. Now it's more, I'm just happy to have a great bowl of vanilla ice cream.
Sure. Or let's say the product shine on its own, and then using some of like the wonderful techniques that you have learned just to make the dish like being perceived simple, even if it's not the case, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would like to pick up your brain. I'm always asking the guests on my show to share a recipe guidance, to the home cook. They can create, at home, and it will be Dan Kluger style. So because it's the spring, and then you have a lot of salads as well in your cookbook, I thought that's maybe a salad could be interesting. So what would be your suggestion for someone like me to make, interesting salad with a twist?
I mean, I think I would certainly go from the book, I would go for the sugar snap pea salad. I can't wait for some sugar snaps. I know they're around the corner. And it's a pretty simple salad. It does have some salad greens, but it's really more about the sugar snaps and some radishes that are providing crunch and bitterness. The sugar snaps we char. So they're lightly charred. So, they're still a little crunchy, but they have these bits of smokiness and bitterness and char to them. And then we kind of round the whole thing out, balance it out with this dressing that's like a manchego vinaigrette, almost like a classic, creamy Parmesan black pepper
Yeah.
vinaigrette that you would have had.
I like that. You're using the cheese as well, that you are talking about the techniques, to bring the creaminess to the dressings.
Exactly. It just makes it really rich and creamy, and it's a different way of using the cheese, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So before we finish, I would like to, go through a series of rapid fire questions, if it's okay with you.
Okay.
If you have the energy for it. You may need some coffee.
I'll try.
So what would you have been if you did not become a chef?
I don't know, but I think as I get older, I think I probably would have ended up doing something else with my hands, like woodworking or carpentry or building.
Okay. So you and I are going in a tasting tour in, a part of Manhattan. What are like the 5 spots that you will take me to? And of course, beside your place, outside of your place.
I think we'd probably go start all the way downtown and have some dim sum. And then from there, maybe go up and have some sushi at Shuko.
Uh-huh.
And maybe head over to somewhere like Rosemary's or Quality Eats, have some salads, some veggies. What's next? I can never think of where I want to eat when I have to. I'd love to, you know what? I'd say maybe we finish off with some pastas at Resdora.
Okay.
Or head over to Lilia and have some pasta over there.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good. Sorry to make you think a little bit more, but what are like the 3 cookbooks that inspire you the most in your career?
Think Like a Chef for sure. Yep. Charlie Trotter's first book. I think it was just Charlie Trotter's. And what else? Mario Batali's Simple Italian Food. One other one is Jean-Georges Simple Cuisine. Those ones I was probably, facing them all day long every day as a young cook.
What is your favorite guilty pleasure food?
Sour candy or chocolate, like M&Ms.
Okay. They are brutal. Yes.
Yeah.
What's
Not good for my diet.
No, mine either. What's your biggest pet peeves in the kitchen?
Cleanliness.
Uh-huh.
And noise, just overall noise.
Oh, okay.
I feel like I've developed some kind of noise allergy. Like I can't stand the banging of the pots. I can't stand shouting back and forth.
Oh, and sometimes there might be a lot in the kitchen. Yeah.
Yeah. I like it a little calmer these days.
Okay. And that's
I'm getting old.
And I'm guessing no music background, correct?
Rarely.
Rarely.
Now we kind of have loosened up a little bit and have some music playing once in a while, but in general, it's too much.
Yeah. Okay. And my last question is obviously connected to, flavors and pantry. And I'm curious, beside the classics, when I say classics, think about ketchup, mustards, and mayo and so on. What condiments, spices, sauces, or dressing do you have at hand in your home, in your closets, or in your...
Mustard, miso, maple syrup. Those are 3 M's. Lots of vinegars. Everything from white wine and champagne to red wine, apple cider. Some of those are specialty vinegars too. And good olive oil, soy sauce, and some kind of chili oil, chili paste.
Okay. Very good, Chef. Thank you so much for being a guest, and I appreciate the time that you have shared with us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Chef Dan Kluger. If you did, please share it with a friend or a colleague. Please make sure to subscribe or follow the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any other platform where you listen to podcasts. Find the show notes of all episodes at flavorsunknown.com. My next episode will be a panel discussion with 3 guests: Peter Ferriero, the film director of Her Name is Chef, and he will be there with 2 of the chefs featured on his documentary, Chef Elizabeth Faulkner and Chef Juliet Masters. I see you in 2 weeks, and until then, remember that people who love to eat are always the best people.
You've just enjoyed another delicious episode of Flavors Unknown. Hungry for more? Hit subscribe. Tell us where you're listening from by leaving a review. And for social media and show notes, head to flavorsunknown.com.